chapter of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. We'll begin with Sankirtan. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste, Saraswati, Gaurani, Charini, Nirvishesha, Namaste, Saraswati, Gaurani, Charini, Nirvishesha, Jaya Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Siddhartha Srivastava Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Siddhartha Srivastava Gaura Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Govinda ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandasya Ginangina Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Krishnan Sabdam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Krishna Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charine Shri Pastrati. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to serve. I present this overview of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is the wonderful book by Srila Prabhupada that's based on Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the biography of Lord Chaitanya. So I pray for all your blessings to do justice to this class so we can learn more about the teachings and the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya in order to develop our love and our services to Him. So last week we started with the first chapter, and this is entitled Teachings to Rupa Goswami. We divided it into parts so that we could better get to the teachings of the Lord, and this is part 2. Each week we will start with the invocation, which is verse 18 of the first chapter of the Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Glory to Shri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Shri Gaura Lord Chaitanya. So last week, Lord Chaitanya had started his teachings to Srila Rupa Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada continues. Krishna bhaktas are free from all material desires. Although those who are theoretically liberated by knowing that the living entity is not material may be classified among liberated souls, they still have desires. Their main desire is to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such persons are very much attached to performing Vedic rituals and righteous activities in order to enjoy material prosperity. Even when some of them transcend material enjoyment, they still try to enjoy in the spiritual world, emerging into the existence of the Supreme Lord. Some of them also desire to attain mystic powers through the execution of yoga. As long as any of these desires are within a person's heart, he cannot understand the nature of pure devotional service, and on account of constantly being agitated by such desires, he is not peaceful. This is a very significant point that Srila Prabhupada is making. Last week we had concluded by discussing that those who are actually civilized in human society are very few, and out of those people who are actually living civilized lives and take to spiritual life, not all of them are exactly equal. Because even though people may be on the spiritual path, it doesn't mean that they're free of material desires. And certainly people who want liberation, but want liberation for material desires, namely to be feeling powerful or superior or anything along that line, that is not pure, and it's not these are material desires and not spiritual desires, and they don't bring the person peace of mind. And this is actually a bit ironic because our concept of spiritual people is that they should be peaceful. Generally, when somebody thinks of a spiritual person, they imagine people who can meditate peacefully or spend their lives peacefully absorbed in thought of God. But as long as the mind is agitated by material desires, no one can be peaceful. So those who are on spiritual path for material desires, whether they are studying literature, whether they are engaging in meditation, whether they're performing great sacrifices, whether they're choosing the path of charity. But as long as they're doing this with a desire for their own pleasure or their own gratification in some way, even if they're desiring something like liberation, which you think is spiritual, but they want that liberation so they can get power by becoming one with God, this will not make them peaceful. Because we think that getting our desires will make us peaceful without realizing that the desires are a constant source of mental agitation. And because we're always full of desires, then we're never peaceful. And this is not only on a personal level, but also in society at large, where everybody is trying to satisfy their desires at the cost of somebody else. The only way in which we can attain a peaceful mind, peaceful existence, is when we give up our material desires um, and then act according to Krishna's desires. Because, as we also said last week, we can't give up desire altogether. Srila Prabhupada says that someone without desires is dead, basically. But we must make those desires spiritual by going according to what Krishna wants. So Srila Prabhupada quotes Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 14, Text 5. Muktanam api siddhanam narayana parayanah sudurlabha prasantatma bodhishva api bhamane. O great sage, out of many millions of liberated persons and persons who have achieved success in mystic yoga, it is very rare to find one who is completely devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is therefore filled with peace. Lord Chaitanya next explains that of the many thousands and millions of living entities wandering in the material world, one who, by the grace of Lord Krishna and the spiritual master, gets the seed of devotional service is very rare and fortunate. A pious or religious man is generally inclined to worship deities in various temples. But if by chance, even without his knowledge, he offers his obeisances and worshipful respects to Lord Vishnu and receives the favor of a Vaishnava, a devotee of the Lord, at that time he acquires the assets necessary to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So generally, religious processes, like I mentioned, require a bit of effort. People may be put off. They go to the temple and then they have to engage in elaborate worship, and still they're not certain of getting the mercy of the Lord. But Srila Prabhupada explains that if we get the mercy of a Vaishnava, then we can certainly get the mercy of the Lord. And for such mercy, there isn't a requirement for great worship or elaborate sacrifices or anything of that nature. Srila Prabhupada gives a wonderful history of Narada Muni here to illustrate this point. That in his previous birth, Narada was a little boy, the son of a poor maidservant. And so he certainly had no access to um, the kind of resources that would be required for great worship or sacrifices. But he did have the association of great Vaishnavas who served very faithfully without. And because of um, this service that he rendered, he was able to attain the position as one of the greatest preachers of the Lord's holy name in next existence. So all we need to do is to faithfully serve those who serve Krishna. This is a sure way to get the Lord's favor. Srila Prabhupada continues. Vaishnavas are generally very compassionate towards the conditioned souls. Without even being invited, a devotee will go from door to door to enlighten people, to bring them out of the darkness of ignorance by imparting knowledge of the living entities, constitutional position as a servant of Lord Krishna. Such devotees are empowered by the Lord to distribute devotional consciousness or Krishna consciousness to people in general. They are known as authorized spiritual masters, and it is by the mercy of such a spiritual master that a conditioned soul gets the seed of devotional service. The causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is first appreciated when one comes in touch with a bona fide spiritual master who can enlighten the conditioned soul and bring him to the highest position of devotional life. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya said that by the mercy of the spiritual master one can achieve the causeless mercy of the Lord. By the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can attain the mercy of the bona fide spiritual master. So, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing this point that the Vaishnavas are more compassionate, more kind, more merciful than anyone else. The Srimad Bhagavatam says that they are the highest humanitarian workers because they go out without any personal motivation, whereas even in charitable work, there can also be a personal sense of satisfaction that motivates somebody. This is something we're going to discuss later on today. And Vaishnavas, though, without any personal motivation, they go out to people um, and take many risks in order to rescue these souls and bring them back to Krishna's lotus feet. Because of the risks that they take, because of the hardships, and because of their selfless natures, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita very emphatically that such persons are the dearest to him. In Bhagavad Gita 8:69, Nacha tasman manusheshu kashin me priyakritamaha Kavita nacha tasmat anyaha priyataro bhave. There is no one more dear, nor will there anyone, nor will there be anyone more dear to Krishna than the preacher of the holy name. So such preachers are by default Shiksha Gurus, or instructing gurus to all. And some of them may also be Diksha Gurus or spiritual masters. Either way, such persons are spiritual masters to to the rest of us. And the importance of us always respecting their position is explained here by Srila Prabhupada, because we get the mercy of Krishna through the Guru, and we also get um, the Guru from Krishna. So this, the spiritual master's instructions and association, these are gifts from Krishna that we should never take for granted. Sometimes we find in the material world that if we make some advancement in a certain field, perhaps at work or um, in a social way, and we surpass the ones that have taught us or have guided us in that field, then we may feel more superior to them. We may feel like we've outgrown them. We may feel that we don't need them anymore. But that is never something that should happen in spiritual life, because the association, the mercy, the grace of the spiritual master is always necessary, no matter how advanced we are. And we have a very powerful example in this regard of Ramachandra Puri. So he was the disciple of the great Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri, we can recap, was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Madhavendra Puri was the spiritual master of Ishwara Puri, and Ishwara Puri was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. So Madhavendra Puri had this disciple, Ramachandra Puri, who was serving his spiritual master at the time of him leaving this world. And his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri, was so absorbed in love of Krishna that he was ecstatically praying and crying out to the Lord still. And Ramachandra Puri was trying to, basically, he was criticizing his spiritual master, telling him to calm and focus on Brahman. So certainly it's a great offense to criticize the spiritual master, especially when one doesn't understand what the mood of the spiritual master is. Either way, one should never criticize the spiritual master. And Ramachandra Puri had a very unfortunate fate. After that, he lost his spiritual merit. He became a fault finder. He actually became more on the speculative side of spiritual life. So he was actually becoming a personalist. So he lost all his spiritual credit because of that. This is something that we must be so careful to avoid. Prabhupada continues. Thus, by the mercy of the spiritual master and Krishna, one receives the seed of devotional service. Then one has to sow the seed in the field of his heart, just as a gardener sows the seed of a valuable tree. After sowing the seed, one has to water it by chanting and hearing the holy name of the Supreme Lord, and by taking part in discussions about the science of devotional service, the society of pure devotees. When the plant of devotional service sprouts up from the seed of devotion, it begins to grow freely. When it is fully grown, it surpasses the length and breadth of this universe and enters the transcendental atmosphere of the spiritual world, gradually entering the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan. There the plant takes shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. That is the ultimate goal of devotional service. After attaining this position, the plant produces a fruit of love of God, Godhead. To taste this fruit, however, it is necessary for the devotee or transcendental gardener to water the plant daily by hearing and chanting. Unless one waters the plant by chanting and hearing, there is every chance that it will dry up. So this valuable plant of devotional service just requires two things, hearing and chanting. It's much more simpler than what we mentioned before. There's no need to study vast amounts of scripture, develop speculative theories on it. There's no need to engage in meditation for hours, days, weeks, or years. There's no need to pronounce one's home and go off to the temple. All that we need to do is hear and chant, but there is a caveat to this in that it must be attentive hearing and chant. So hearing will work much more effectively if one is able to put one's heart into it. That's the way that we can not only absorb what we're hearing into the mind, but we can also realize it within the heart. So this process of realization of scripture is very important, and it's very necessary. And what it means is that we must deeply contemplate what we've heard. We certainly can't contemplate something we haven't paid attention to. When we contemplate scripture, the Lord within the heart can awaken understandings within us, where we can appreciate the beauty of what we've been hearing, we can actually um, derive the understanding that is necessary for this to become practically applied in our lives. This is the goal of what we're learning. And of course, then from there, we can preach it more effectively also. Certainly, we have to attend to the chant all the time. And when we're able to chant and hear with attention, then we're able to water this very valuable plant of devotional service. So, with the chanting, it is very important that we avoid the offenses, which Srila Prabhupada is going to explain further. Lord Chaitanya pointed out to Rupa Goswami that there was another danger to be encountered while watering the root of the devotional plant. After a plant has grown somewhat, an animal may come and either eat it or destroy it. When the green leaves of a plant are eaten by some animal, the plant generally dies. Thus, one has to take precautions so that the plant of devotional service is not disturbed by animals, which represent offenses. The most dangerous animal is a mad elephant, for if a mad elephant enters a garden, it causes tremendous damage to plants and trees. An offense to a pure devotee of the Lord is called Vaishnava Aparad, the mad elephant offense. In the discharge of devotional service, an offense to the feet of a pure devotee creates havoc and stops one's advancement. Thus, one has to defend the plant of bhakti by fencing it off properly and taking care to offend pure devotees. Then the plant of devotional service will be properly protected. So we've just described how dear the devotees are to the Supreme Lord. So we certainly can't risk making any offenses to them. This will be seriously damaging to the point where it completely destroy one's devotional service, as we saw happen to Ramachandra Puri. So we must be careful because sometimes we think that if we're not being openly belligerent, causing outright fights with devotees, that we're not offending. But sometimes offenses can be more subtle. It can be when we just ignore someone, don't greet them or think that they're worthy of being spoken to. It can be when we want to correct them on something, but we do it harshly. It can be gossiping behind their backs and causing somebody else's opinion of them to become very negative, so that that person then starts behaving badly towards them as well. It can manifest as these envious and competitive thoughts that infiltrate our minds, and it disturbs even our devotional service, of course. And this is very, very dangerous kind of situation. And so we have to be very circumspect about our behaviors and go to the root as to why we may be offending somebody. We may find that we have self-esteem issues. Maybe that's why we feel the envy towards them. We may have been offended by them at some point, and we may not have gotten over that, maybe playing on our minds. So we have to address those kind of issues. It may be that we're just inadvertently gossiping, don't think about it. And sometimes we don't realize that we're not making enough of an effort to speak to them. So this self-awareness is something that is very important in our dealings with devotees. So we should always pray to Krishna to help us with this, and then we should make that effort as well from our parts in order to cultivate that and have the right kind of behavior towards those who serve Krishna. So Sri Prabhupada continues. An offense to a pure devotee is one of the 10 offenses against the holy name. The first offense is to blaspheme the great devotees who have tried to spread the glories of the holy name all over the world. The greatest offender at the feet of the holy name is the rascal who is envious of such devotees. The holy name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna, and Lord Krishna cannot tolerate offenses against a pure devotee who, following the order of his spiritual master, is spreading the holy name all over the world. The second offense is to deny that Lord Vishnu is the supreme, is the absolute truth. Since there is no difference between the Lord and his name, qualities, form, and pastimes or activities, one who sees a difference is considered an offender. The Lord being supreme, no one is equal to or greater than him. Consequently, one who thinks that the name of some demigod is equal to the Lord's name is an offender. So the second point, the second offense, Sri Prabhupada has given us an important elaboration. Basically, we should know what is one with Krishna and what is not one with Krishna. So who is one with Krishna and who is not one. So the root of the thinking when somebody thinks that the name of the holy names of Krishna are equal to the names of demigods is basically impersonalist thinking. That person is thinking that the demigods are the same as Krishna and can be one with him, as much as they may think that they could be one with Krishna as well. So this is why it is a great offense to think of the holy names of the Lord as equal to those of the demigods, because it actually implies personal line of thinking. But also, we must know that the Lord's name, form, qualities, and pastimes are not different from him. So whereas the demigods and others are all different from him, but his holy name, his paraphernalia, anything that's connected to him, his pastimes, those are the same. So we may not be advanced to realize this practically at the beginning, but as long as we're always reminding ourselves and showing the proper respect within time, it'll become natural for us to see everything related to Krishna as one. The third offense is to consider the bona fide spiritual master to be a common man. The fourth offense is to blaspheme the Vedic literature, the Vedas, and such corollaries as the Puranas. The fifth offense is to consider the glories of the holy name to be exaggerations. The sixth offense is to imagine a perverted meaning of the holy name. The seventh offense is to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. It is understood that by chanting the holy name, one is freed from sinful reactions, but this does not mean that one should perversely act sinfully on the strength of chanting. That is the greatest offense. The eighth offense is to equate chanting the holy name with religious rituals, austerity, renunciation, and sacrificial performances. Chanting the holy name is as good as associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas these pious activities are only a means of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they can also be performed for screen just froze, for some material reason. The ninth offense is to preach the glories of the holy name of God to a faithless person. The 10th and last offense is to maintain material attachment even after hearing and chanting the holy name of God. The idea is that by chanting the holy name without offense, one is elevated to the liberated platform where one is freed from all material attachments. Thus, if one chants the holy names and still has material attachments, he is committing an offense. So besides these offenses, Srila Prabhupada also explains that there are further impediments that we must be very careful of. When this plant of devotional service is growing, there may be weeds known as material desires, which we've already discussed is so dangerous to our peace of mind and spiritual life. And these become very, very strangulating to this tender devotional kripa. So these weeds become worse when we make some advancement in spiritual life. As we said, we may take initiation, and after that, we take senior roles within the spiritual societies. We may take on management roles. We may even become gurus. And then, if we become attached to the power, to the fame, to the prestige, to having followers, the material benefits that come with followers, these are extremely, extremely dangerous to devotional service. This is why Lord Chaitanya prays in the Shikshashtakam, Nadhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam pajagatishakamne, mama janmini janmanishvari bhavatad bhakti ravadikivai. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. So the importance of Lord Chaitanya's instructions is that we must consider that Lord Chaitanya had imparted a lot of knowledge to Rupa and Sanatana Goswami and other of his disciples and associates, but he only personally wrote 8 Sanskrit verses. This is what we know as Sri Shikshashtakam. Out of these 8 verses, he has denoted one whole verse to this point of avoiding material desires and gives examples of the types of material desires. So this indicates how dangerous these are to our devotional service and how much we must be careful to avoid it. This kind of deterioration can cause us to even break the religious, the regulative rules, and all the serious setbacks to devotional service is the way we actually um, we hurt the Lord, because we're trying to develop our love for Him, but at the same time, uh, we're damaging that love with these kind of unnecessary problems. So we have to be so mindful about it, so careful about it in our devotional service. Sri Prabhupada says, if one is not particularly careful, by watering the plant of devotional service, one will instead nourish the weeds described above, which will then grow very luxuriant and hamper one's progress. The idea is that when one waters a garden, not only does the desired plant grow rapidly, but the unwanted plants grow also. If the gardener does not see these weeds and cut them down, they will overcome and choke the plant of devotion. It is thus the duty of the neophyte devotee to cut down all the weeds that may grow by the watering process of devotional service. If one is careful to guard against the growth of these weeds, the plant of devotion will grow luxuriantly and reach the ultimate goal, Goloka. So these weeds that we've mentioned, these material desires and the way they manifest, they're just as dangerous as the mad elephant of offenses. The difference, of course, is that the weeds tend to develop slowly over time, and they may escape our attention. A mad elephant tearing into the garden would probably get one's attention a bit more easily. So the root of this is inattention. We said that the plant of devotional service is watered by devotion, by hearing and chanting devotion. But if we're inattentive in these activities, and we're inattentive to how our desires are creeping up within ourselves, if we're not watching our behavior, being self-aware, as we said, and doing an assessment of how we are carrying out our devotional activities, then we're going to miss the weeds. We're going to miss the dangerous effect that they have on our spiritual life. So in this regard, it's also important to have the guidance of senior devotees who will be able to give us instructions, things that we are lacking in some way with our devotional practices, or we're being infiltrated by desires that are not conducive to them, as well as by having that healthy sense of self-introspection as well. Prabhupada says, there are many practices leading to spiritual knowledge and transcendental bliss, including the ritualistic sacrifices recommended in the Vedas, the execution of austerities and pious duties, and the practice of mystic yoga. These all reward different results to their performers, but all these rewards appear to glitter only as long as one is not elevated to the transcendental love of the Lord. Love of God is dormant in everyone, and it can be awakened from its dormant position by the execution of pure devotional service, just as a person bitten by a serpent and fallen unconscious can be revived by spanning the moon. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that this this theme of material desires that creep into spiritual life, it's the reason why people are engaged in all these different activities, as we mentioned, the ritualistic activities, the meditation, all the pious duties. But being motivated by material desires, they only bring material rewards. And in the common age, people are not even so keen to be engaged in these kind of spiritual activities. Generally, it's just that people depend on working hard, or with the deterioration of Kali Yuga, begging, borrowing, stealing in any way to get what they want. But even if they're taking to spiritual activities, but doing with material desires, they're only going to get temporary rewards. These temporary rewards are of the nature of the material world. They're full of ignorance, and they don't bring us that spiritual, that self-realization, which is so different to the results of engaging in devotional service, which is completely spiritual, eternal, and full of knowledge. Of course, those who are engaged in devotional service are not looking for any reward, but these rewards come naturally by the mercy of Krishna. Lord Sri Prabhupada continues, after speaking in this way about pure devotional service, Lord Chaitanya began to describe that service and its symptoms to Rupa Goswami. He explained that in pure devotional service, there can be no desire other than the desire to advance Krishna consciousness. A devotee should accept only those things that are favorable for keeping his body and soul together, and should reject those things that increase the demands of the body. Only the bare necessities for bodily maintenance should be accepted. By making one's bodily necessities secondary, one can primarily devote his time to the cultivation of Krishna consciousness through the chanting of the holy name of God. So we may have material needs, even if we don't have material desires, because we have to keep this body and soul together. So Lord Chaitanya is explaining that if we keep these needs simple, if it's just what we need for this body to be maintained, simple prasadam, a simple place to live, simple as much as possible in material sense, but used in service of Krishna and therefore um, higher in that sense, then this will give us enough time and concentration to be able to focus on developing our love for Krishna. So we have to be also, again, circumspect with our lives, because each one of us is different, and what is simple to one person may not be simple to the other. So once again, this is where it is so important to get guidance from our senior teachers, from Guru, from Sadhu, from Sastra, um, as we've explained before, because all of these can guide us as to how we can actually live our lives in the most effective way to develop our Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says, pure devotional service means engaging all one's senses in the service of the Lord. At the present moment, our senses are all designated because the body is designated. So we think that our body belongs to a particular society or a particular country or a particular family. In this way, the body is bound by so many designations. Similarly, the senses belong to the body, and when the body is subject to such designations, the senses are also. Thus, one engages the senses on behalf of family, society, nation, and so on. When the senses are so engaged, one cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. The senses must be purified, and this is possible when one purely understands that he belongs to Krishna and that his life belongs to Krishna. In other words, that his identity is to be an eternal servant of Krishna. In this way, one can engage his senses in the service of the Lord. Such engagement is called pure devotional service. So this is the further explanation that Srila Prabhupada gives as to why people work hard. Not only are they trying to gratify their own senses, there's also the concept of extended sense gratification, where they're taking care of family, taking care of their society or their nation. So people may generally think of this as altruistic or charitable, but as we explained earlier, well, as long as this is motivated by some kind of personal desire, in that maybe one performs the service to the family so that he can be seen as a very good person, that he can admired and respected, or one gives that charity or does some kind of humanitarian work so that they can get that sense of satisfaction they've done something for somebody else, or they serve their nation, their country, so that they can be admired and recognized. All of these are motivated by material desires. Basically, anything that's not done purely for is material. So it is still a type of sense gratification, an extended type of sense gratification, as Srila Prabhupada explains it. And all of this is not going to get us that spiritual goal. A pure devotee accepts the transcendental loving service of the Lord, but rejects all kinds of liberation for his personal sense gratification. This is stated by Lord Kapila in Srimad Bhagavatam in his explanation of the nature of pure devotional service. As soon as a pure devotee hears the glories and transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart, his mind at once flows towards the Lord, just as the waters of the Ganges flow down towards the sea. Such spontaneous attraction of the devotee's mind to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead signifies pure devotional service. So, what to speak of material desires? The pure devotee doesn't even care about liberation. Nothing is for him and everything is for Krishna. And his mind is just captivated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this reminds us of this beautiful verse by Queen Kunti in Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, chapter 8, text 42. Tvaimenanyaveshaya matirmadhupade sakritpati vahatad adha gange bhugam udantati. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, Let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. So this should be our goal, not material desires, not liberation, not anything else. All our attention, all our mind focused on Krishna, with that single-minded determination that the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita. We have to persist always in this aim. Sri Prabhupada continues. Devotional service is pure when one engages in the service of the Supreme Lord without any selfish motive and without being hampered by any material impediment. The pure devotee does not desire to live on the same planet as the Supreme Lord, nor does he desire the same opulence as the Lord, nor does he desire to have the same form as the Lord, nor to live with him side by side, nor to merge into his existence. Even if the Lord offers the pure devotee such rewards, he rejects them. The point is that a pure devotee is so much absorbed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord that he has no time to think of any benefit beyond his immediate engagement. Just as an ordinary materialistic businessman thinks of nothing else when he is absorbed in his business, pure devotee, when engaged in the service of the Lord, does not think of anything beyond that engagement. So we're coming back to this point of liberation. Srila Prabhupada has actually detailed 5 types of liberation that one can get. So those 5 types are merging in, as the impersonalists like to do, into the effulgence um, of Krishna, called the Brahman, which is actually a temporary kind of liberation. Since, as Sri Prabhupada explained earlier, they're so full of desires that they can't fulfill, that they fall down back into the material world. And then there's 4 other kinds of liberation that are more permanent. Living on the same planet as the Lord, having the same form as the Lord, having the same opulence as the Lord, or living as the Lord's personal associate. So because these may all carry tinges of basically one's, even if not as materialistic as the others, Sri Prabhupada says that the one who is engaged in pure devotional service doesn't even desire this. The only desire basically that a devotee should have is to serve and please Krishna. So people may find it surprising that liberation is not considered a spiritual goal. It is actually material, so much so that Srila Rupa Goswami calls it 2 witches of allurement, namely material desires, bhakti, and liberation. These are also materially motivated, the desire to attain liberation. A lot of the times, because people are so frustrated with what they've experienced in the material world, they just want to get out. Or like the impersonalists who want to have the same power as the God, or for whatever other personal reason one might have, liberation actually becomes a material desire. For anyone who is serious about developing pure love for Krishna, it means engaging in service for him without any kind of motivation at all for oneself, simply motivated by serving Krishna, the way to attain the real peace that we mentioned at the beginning of the class. So Sri Prabhupada says, it is by such transcendental loving service alone that one can surpass the influence of Maya and religion, pure love of God. This is the way that we can attain real peace in this world. So I thank you all so much for your kind attention. Please join us next week when we'll complete this first chapter. Shri Shantaya Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions, comments, corrections?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful class. Thank you. Welcome to His Grace Damodar Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu, welcome. Would you like to share any comments or questions from your side? You may unmute if you would like to speak. Or Risha Mataji, Hare Krishna. Renee Budalu, Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions from your side? No, there's nothing, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So today is a very important day. It's Guru Purnima. It is the appearance day of Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of Krishna. He appeared to compile basically the Vedas into a written form. Previously, it was in an oral form because the people of the ages that came before Kali Yuga were so advanced that they didn't need to have anything written down. If they heard it, they would just remember it at once. So he not only compiled the Vedas, but he also he gave us the histories like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which would simplify the philosophy of the Vedas for us to understand. And then, of course, what is more important to us in devotional service is that he gave us the greatest spiritual literature, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, since all gurus are representatives of Srila Vyasadeva preaching his message of Srimad Bhagavatam and his teachings in general, this day is known as Guru Purnima to give respect to all gurus. It is also the disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami, who is the elder brother of Rupa Goswami, who we've been discussing in class today. And it is also the disappearance day of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Maharaj was an extraordinarily powerful preacher in ISKCON. He was known for his beautiful bhajans, so many wonderful talents in Srila Prabhupada's service, like cooking. He was a very dear spiritual master and guide, and he was also one of the most beloved sons of Srila Prabhupada. So, in honor of these great personalities today, we're going to sing bhajan with Vaishnavata. Om He Vaishnava Pura Pura Sagara Hirashiko Puri. O He Vaishnava Pura Dayara Sagara Hirashiko Puri. Diya Pada Chaya Shara Maya Tamara Charana Dori. Diya Pada Chaya Shara Maya Tamara Charana Dori. Jaya Bhega Dori, Jaya Dosha Shoti, Jaya Guna Jaya Bhega Dori, Jaya Dosha Shoti, Jaya Guna Jaya Satsanga Deva Amara Oshri Sangira Akshe Jaya Satsanga Deho Amare Oshri Sangira Ashe Ekaki Amara Nahi Para Bhaga Harinama Sankirtane Ekaki Amara Nahi Para Bhaga Harinama Sankirtane Tumi Kripa Kori Shadabindu Diya Dehu Krishna Namadha Tumi Kripa Kori Shadabindu Diya Dehu Krishna Namadha Krishna se tumhara Krishna dete para tumhara shakti Krishna se tumhara Krishna dete para tumhara shakti আমি তো গঙ্গাধর কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলি দাই বাবা পাশে পাচ্ছে আমি তো গঙ্গাল কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলি দাই বাবা পাশে পাচ্ছে ও হে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুরা দয়ারা সাগরা শেখর Ore Vaishnava Thakura Doyara Sagara Shri Gauri Diya Parachaya Sharaya Maya Tamara Charana Dhoti Diya Parachaya Sharaya Maya Tamara Charana Dhoti Jaya Vaishnava Thakur 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 Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Jaya 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Rama Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Bol Hare Bol, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Shri Shantai Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Vyasadeva Ki Jai, Shri Sanatana Goswami Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, His Holiness Bhakti Chandra Swami Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Shantai Gaur Hari Hari Bol. We'll read the translation. O Venerable Vaishnav, devotee of Krishna, O ocean of mercy, be merciful unto your servant. Give me the shade of your lotus feet and purify me. I hold on to your lotus feet. Teach me to control my six passions, rectify my six faults. Bestow upon me the six qualities, and offer unto me the six kinds of holy association. I do not find strength to carry on alone the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. Please bless me by giving me just one drop of faith with which to obtain great treasure, the holy name of Krishna. Krishna is yours. You have the power to give him to me. I am simply your servant, running behind you, shouting, Krishna, Krishna. So the elaboration on verse 2, the six passions are those pertaining to words, the mind, anger, the tongue, the stomach, and the genitals. The six faults are overeating, attachment to material things, inability to follow regulative principles, sense gratification, useless idle talk, and impure habits. The six positive qualities are enthusiasm in practicing devotional service, firm faith in devotional processes, a strong desire to attain prema bhakti, a favorable service attitude, avoidance of non-devotees, and appreciation of the company of devotees. The six methods of association are to go to an assembly of devotees, to invite devotees into one's home, to discuss and hear devotional topics, to take the Mahaprasad to devotees, and to offer Mahaprasad to devotees. So this beautiful bhajan is written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and these first two, which is about six passions, six faults, six qualities, six kinds of holy association, are actually the first four verses of the Nectar of Devotion. So, thank you again so much for your kind attention. We pray for Lord Chaitanya's mercy and blessings on you all. Please join us next week. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, everyone.